Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Mr. Joffrey, and I appreciate everybody joining me here today, and I appreciate the Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship for asking me to be part of this. I'm really excited to be here and share with you some of the things that my father and I, actually my father has been sharing with me since I was a child, and now that we've written a book called Becoming a Leader of Character. And we're going to talk about 6 habits of character today that really make or break a leader at work and at home. And I wanted to show you a quick picture, a few quick pictures here of my father and I when we were younger. First of all, you see a picture of my father there as a young cadet, and then myself as a young cadet as well, and then also a picture a few years later here just actually earlier this year. And in our book we tell a lot of stories, and my father tells stories about combat and I tell stories about the business world, and we talk about leaders of character in both places. And so we call ourselves the general and the business guy. So that's where we get that get those monikers there, those names for ourselves. And Mr. Joffrey did a great job of introducing me and who I am. And I also just want to recognize the fact I am a husband and a father of 2 college students, 2 students in university, and I believe that's my most important job in the world. So as we get started, I want to just ask you a question. I want to ask you a question. Why do you think people follow you? Why do you think people follow you? This is a question I ask at the beginning of all the talks that I do, whether or not it's in front of 10 people or 1,000 people. When I sit down and I speak with them, I ask them about their leadership hero. Who is your leadership hero? That person, that leader that you look up to and you say, that's the type of person I want to be. And then I ask them, what 3 traits do you admire most about them? What 3 traits do you admire most about your leadership hero? And I actually did this in an online survey for our book, and I asked the same questions. Who's your leadership hero, and what traits do you admire most about them? And I got over 630 responses to that question. And the responses to that survey fell out like this. 87% of the responses we got had to do with a leader's character. Where only 13% of those responses actually had to do with a leader's competence, the skills that they brought to the table. Isn't that interesting? 87% of people said, I want to follow somebody because of who they are, not what they can do. Yet if you think about what we do in the corporate world and what do we train people on, how much time do we spend training people on management skills? How much time do we spend telling people how to manage resources? I mean, we almost use that term leader and manager interchangeably, but actually there's a difference. See, you manage resources and you lead people. But we spend a lot of time talking about finances, and we talk a lot about building teams, and we talk about moving materials back and forth, and we talk about those things almost like it's the same thing as being a leader, but it's not. And then when we break it down and we talk about what truly is leadership, I want to share with you my father and I's philosophy that we talk about in the book. That leadership is a blend of competence and character. Leadership is a blend of competence and character. Now, competence is hugely important. You have to be good at your job. It's almost the price of admission to get into to be a leader. Nobody's going to promote you anymore and say, oh, now we're going to get you up to speed. They expect you to be ready to go. And actually, that's what all our schools do. That's what universities do. That's what master's degree programs do when you go get a master's in business administration. Those really work on these skills and competencies. And that's what a lot of training, a good training, focuses on those management skills, these competencies. I want you to look at the other side of that diagram there, the part that says character. I want you to think about the biggest leadership failures you know of. Maybe there's somebody you knew, maybe it's somebody in the news, maybe it's somebody in history, and think about those leadership failures. And I want to ask something. How often do those failures that just popped into your mind, were they a result of somebody not being able to do the job? They didn't have the skills. Or how often were those failures an issue of character? Something inside that person that caused them to fail. Their integrity, their courage, their ego. Those things are what cause most of our leadership failures. But we train people over and over again on the other side of the equation, the competency side. And we wonder why our leadership isn't getting any better. why we're standing still as far as growing our leaders. I mean, we're working on team building and personality traits and building trust and strength finders and all those, and these are all great things. But what I'm here to tell you, ladies and gentlemen listening right now, is that's like treating a pneumonia patient with cough medicine. We're treating the symptoms of the disease, but not the disease itself. We're focusing so much on leadership, but we're doing it without spending enough time talking about the issue of character and the character of the leader. Now, you say, why is this important? Well, there was a book that was written by a gentleman named Fred Kiel, K-I-E-L, and he's from the Harvard Business School, and it was called Return on Character. And what they found, the tangible benefits of having a leader of character, was that the companies that were led by people of character, as we're going to talk today, had 5 times the financial returns of leaders that were not. 5 times better return. That might have gotten a few of you to open your ears right now. So when I talk about leaders and leaders of character, and I mentioned the book that my father and I wrote, what is a leader of character? And I'm always going to, what we always try to do, and in this book we always try to define the terms that we use, and we try to do it simply in 12 words or less so a 12-year-old can understand. And so when we talk about leader of character, that's someone who uses influence to achieve a moral or ethical goal. Someone who uses influence to achieve a moral, ethical goal. It's not just having influence over people, right? That's important because, let's face it, a sheep without shepherd is still a sheep, but a shepherd without sheep, well, he's not a shepherd anymore, is he? The followers make you a leader. If you don't have followers, you're not a leader. So you need to have followers. But what separates a leader from a leader of character is motives. A moral or ethical goal. What are you leading people towards? Hitler had followers. Adolf Hitler had followers, but what he was leading people towards was evil and terrible. So I don't like to put him in the same category as the great leaders that we were thinking of earlier. When we talk about a leader of character is someone who uses influence to achieve a moral or ethical goal. And that's who we focus on in our book, Becoming a Leader of Character. And we're going to talk the rest of the time today about 6 different habits of character. And here's our announcement that I'd like to make. Our foreword for the book was written by Coach Mike Krzyzewski, or as we call him in the U.S. here, Coach K. He's a 2-time gold medal U.S. Olympic basketball coach, the winningest college basketball coach in history, 5-time national champion. When you talk about basketball internationally, most people know who Coach K is. Most people see him as the best basketball coach in the world, and we're very honored to have him write the foreword to our book. And one of the things he says in the foreword is this: you have to do what you want to be. If you want to be a great leader, a leader of character, you have to do what great leaders do. Just like good basketball players practice in order to become great basketball players, good leaders must practice in order to become great leaders. Now, what are we talking about here? What's unique about what we're talking about here? We're talking about exercising. Your character is like a muscle. You need to exercise it. Okay, it's like a muscle. See, a lot of people look at the term character or integrity or some other parts of character, and they say, well, when the big test comes, I'm going to be ready. This little lie is not a big deal. But when the big test comes, I'm going to be ready. And to that we say, well, if you never lifted 50 pounds, what makes you think you're going to lift 300? See, your character is like a muscle. You have to exercise it daily. You have to break a sweat. See, just like getting fit, you don't get fit without being uncomfortable, right? You don't work out without breaking a sweat. If you don't sweat while you're working out, you're probably not getting any more fit. Well, it's the same thing with becoming a better leader. If you're not uncomfortable, if you're not pushing yourself, you're probably not getting any better. You don't become fit by reading a fitness magazine. You don't become a leader by reading a book. You have to go out and do those things so you can be the person you want to be. You have to exercise your muscles now, or else they're never going to grow. And if one is strong right now and you don't exercise it, guess what? It becomes vulnerable and it becomes weaker. So when we talk about character, though, what are we talking about? We're talking about habits. Okay, and we didn't come up with this. The general and the business guy, General James Anderson and Dave Anderson, didn't come up with this. These ideas really started with the ancient philosophers in Greece. We're talking Plato and Aristotle. Plato said that your character, your ethos, comes from what you think about, the information that you have, the knowledge that you have. His student Aristotle said no. He took it further. He said no, it goes further than that. It's your habits. Aristotle said it's your habits. You become just by doing just acts. You become brave by doing brave acts. So when we define character in 12 words or less, so a 12-year-old can understand, we say our character is our habitual way of operating. How we are is who we are. How we are is who we are. It is the sum total of our habits, our good habits and our bad habits. Now that's great news for all of us right now if you're listening, because you may have some bad habits and you're wondering, oh my gosh, I've been doing this for the same way for a long time. How do I change it? You change your habits one choice at a time. So we form habits one choice at a time, and we change habits one choice at a time. Each time we make a choice, it makes it easier to make that same choice again, and again, and again. And each time we make a choice, it becomes closer and closer to becoming a habit. So if you're in a bad habit, whether or not it be with integrity, whether or not it be with selflessness, or whether or not it be with your pride, you can start making new choices today and start on your way towards a new habit and start changing your character. That's the great news. And today we're going to talk about, and in our book we talk about 6 habits of character. And these are the 6 habits we focus on: courage, humility, integrity, duty, selflessness, and positivity. Now, why are courage and humility so much bigger and up front and on top of the other ones? It's because when you think about it, when you think about failures in character almost always go back to an issue of fear or pride, don't they? I mean, fear or pride. Think about those leadership failures, and think about now how often those go back to being a character failure. And then you look at why do people fail? It's almost always an issue of fear or pride. Fear or pride are the root cause of most of our character failures, whether or not we're a leader or not. It's fear or pride. And all these character habits of character all tie into each other and are related. But the foundational ones are courage and humility. You battle fear and pride through developing courage and humility. So let's talk about courage. Let's talk about how West Point develops courage in its leaders. I got a picture of the boxers up there. Why? Because every cadet at West Point has to take boxing. Why? Well, it's not because West Point thinks cadets are going to go into battle and box. It's because they want cadets to face their fears. In the small things, the daily exercises, they want them to get up there and face their fears. See, every time you get into the boxing ring, you know that day somebody's going to hit you in the face. I knew every day. It didn't matter what test I had coming up. If I had electrical engineering or if I had any sort of math, science, or engineering classes I didn't love to take, all I thought about was that day someone was going to hit me in the face. But I had to get in there and I had to box. I had to face my fears on a daily basis. And they were teaching us in the small things to lift 50 pounds. So when the real tests of our courage came, we could lift 300. And I love that quote by C.S. Lewis that's down there. Courage is not just one of the virtues, but the form of every virtue at its testing point. The form of every virtue at its testing point. Without courage, so many of these other virtues that we talk about are impossible. So let's look at this. Let's look at the definition of courage that in 12 words or less so a 12-year-old can understand. Courage, to act despite perceived or actual risk. To act despite perceived or actual risk. Perceived risks or actual risk. There are actual risks, like getting hit in the face when you're boxing or on the battlefield. But how many of our risks that we see are just perceived risks? There's something that never happened. The things we stress over, the anxiety that takes over for us, and we sit there and we think about those things, and yet they never happen. That's a perceived risk. And see, one of those might be failure. We have a fear of failure. And see, leaders of character, they don't fear failure, they embrace failure. They don't see failure as a dead-end road. They see it just as a pit stop on the way to success. See, we leaders of character know that failure is just another way of learning how not to do something. Without failure, we don't learn anything. We never learned to walk without falling down. None of us came out of our mother's womb running. We had to learn by walking, taking a step, falling down, taking a step, falling down, taking a step, falling down. Just pretty soon we were running all over the place. We have to embrace failure to be a leader of character. Leaders of character trust first. They aren't distrusting. Now, they aren't naive either. If somebody has proven untrustworthy, then then they're careful. But what if it's a stranger? What if somebody you don't know? You trust first. Now, what a lot of people say is, well, Dave, don't you get burned a lot? Don't people let you down a lot? And I say about 20% of the time. But you know what that means? That means I'm right 80% of the time. That means when I trust first, that means I am treating 20%, let's put it this way, when I distrust somebody, I'm treating 20% of the people as they deserve and 80% of the people worse than they deserve. Now, if I trust first, I'm treating 80% of the people as they deserve and 20% of the people better than they deserve. Which is a better place to work? What do you think? So the other thing that leaders of character do is they need to lead upwards. They need to speak up to their superiors and talk to their superiors when they see something is wrong, when something can be improved. These all are facing your fears, and these are all exercises leaders of character do on a regular basis. As Ralph Waldo Emerson said, do the thing you are afraid to do, and the death of fear is certain. So let's go back to that whole idea of exercising here. What are your courage exercises? What are you going to do to break a sweat? What can you do daily to build those muscles so you're prepared for the big test? You don't have to jump out of an airplane. You don't have to do some sort of crazy cliff diving or anything like that. Lots of these things are small daily things that are going to help you build your courage. A couple of examples that I've listed for you. Try something new and uncomfortable. Do something that you've never done before. Don't stay in your comfort zone. I always tell people your comfort zone is your mediocrity zone. Try something new. Have a tough conversation with somebody you've been putting off. Right? You had that person that you need to have a tough conversation with, whether or not it be a spouse, whether or not it be a boss, whether or not it be a child, whether or not it be an employee. Don't put it off anymore. Go ahead and have that conversation. Because each time you make these choices, it's going to make it easier to make those same choices again. Now, the next habit that we're going to talk about, the foundational habit of humility. I want to take a second on this and talk about this because, see, the question is, a lot of people wonder, and it seems in today's society, that humility and confidence can't coexist in the same people. Because you have so many people who pound their chests and think that they got to show how good they are at things and let everybody know about it. So can confidence and humility coexist in the same person? Well, I'm here to tell you humility is not a demonstration of weakness as some people believe it is, but a quiet declaration of strength. And when we have humility, I mean, let's just think about that. Society tells us that confidence is almost the same as arrogance based on what you see from people. But let's look at three examples. Three historical examples of three men where humility and confidence were in the same man. Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Jesus Christ, all of them, all three of them, didn't need the spotlight, weren't looking for the spotlight, weren't looking for everybody to pay attention to them. But when they stood up to the authorities, and when they stood up to the authorities, they stayed strong, and they changed things for generations upon generations of their people. These people changed the world with humility and confidence together. So yes, humility and confidence can go together. And we got to defeat our pride in order to become a leader of character. And see, humility in 12 words or less is believing and acting like it's not about me. Notice that picture I have there where that person says, "Hello, I'm the boss." I mean, if you have to tell everybody you're the boss, I'm the leader around here, well, guess what? You know, there might be an area of humility that you need to work on. See, leaders of character, what they do is they know how to admit their mistakes and their weaknesses because they believe it's not about me. They believe they aren't perfect. And so they can admit their mistakes and their weaknesses. Leaders of character are coachable. I truly believe that being coachable is a window into somebody's character. If every time you tell somebody they need to get better somewhere and they have some weakness or some place to grow and they get angry or they get upset and they shut down, that's a window into their character. That means there's something inside of them that tells them that, you know what, how dare you tell me I need to get better at something. We all need to get better at something. We all know there's nobody perfect out there. So if we act like we don't have a problem, if we act like we don't have weaknesses and things to get better at, we're acting like we're perfect. And that hurts people's trust in us because they all know we're not perfect. Leaders of character, they show their humility because they're good listeners. There's an old saying that says they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And leaders of character are good listeners. They listen to other people. They don't need to do all the talking. They're very comfortable listening and not being the center of the attention. And leaders of character, they all believe they have room to grow. Again, they all know that they're not a finished product. Leaders of character show their humility because they're consistently trying to grow. They're consistently trying to get better. If they've been a leader for 20 years, they're still trying to get better. My father is 82 years old. He's got 2 leadership books he's reading right now. I guarantee you, one is sitting by his favorite chair, and the other one's sitting by his bed. And he reads consistently on leadership. He's 82 years old and led men in combat 2 different times in Vietnam. Yet he's still trying to become a better leader. That's the type of leader we all want to be around. They have the humility to know that they have room to grow. So what are some of those exercises that we can do? Humility exercises where we can break a sweat, maybe make us feel a little bit uncomfortable, but that's the way we're going to grow, right? We're going to build those muscles through sweating, through practice, like Coach K said. Well, one way we can do it is to give credit to other people on your team. When something goes well for your team, give credit away. Make sure everybody else gets the credit and try not to have the spotlight on yourself. Another way for leaders to do it is to ask us for help from a subordinate. Let's face it, sometimes the subordinates know how to do their job better than we know how to do their job. Ask them to teach you how to do their job. Ask them to teach you what the most important parts of their job is. Because sometimes as we get higher in an organization, we don't have all the expertise that we used to have down when we were in the lower levels ourselves. And the third thing is listen twice as much as you speak. As my father used to say to me, hey, buddy, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them proportionally. Maybe we should listen twice as much as we speak. That's a sign of humility. Now, the third habit I want to focus on is one that a lot of people start out talking about when they talk about character and leaders, and they talk about integrity. But see, here's the interesting thing. It's not integrity unless you have courage. You can't have integrity unless you have courage. And humility as well. See, the word integrity comes from the root word integer, which integer, if you're a math person, is also called a whole number. And so here's the thing about integrity. There's an issue of being whole or pure here. So part-time integrity is not integrity. Telling the truth when I can't be hurt by it is not integrity. So if I only tell the truth when there's no possibility of me being hurt by it, I'm not a person of integrity. Right? So we're talking about a habit here. Look, I'm not a perfect person. I don't have perfect integrity. I'm always striving to build that habit. But let's face it. If it's not integrity, what is it? If I'm only telling the truth when it's easy, what is it then? Well, if it's not integrity, then it's probably what? Hypocrisy might be a word for that. Saying one thing and yet doing another. I think most of us think we're a person of integrity, but do our actions really play out that way? So when we talk about integrity in 12 words or less, it's doing what is good and right and proper, even at personal cost. That's that last part, even at personal cost. And see, leaders of character, their beliefs, their words, and their actions are all aligned. They're all in line together. See, and they know also that half-truths, white lies, and fibs, they make me a liar. So this idea that, oh, this is just a little lie now, it's not a big deal. No, it is a big deal. Let's not call it something that it's not. I mean, we call it half lies, we call them white lies, we call them fibs and things. Why? Because that makes us feel better about being a liar. And we all lie. We all have areas in our integrity that we need to work on, especially when we want things to be more convenient for ourselves. We tend to do these little white lies. But what they do is they make me a liar. And each time I make a choice to lie, just like every other habit of character, each time I make a choice, it makes it easier to make a choice again and again and again. But again, the great news is each time I make a choice in the opposite way for my integrity, it makes it easier to make that same choice again as well. So there are no half-truths, white lies, or fibs. They're all lies. And here's the thing about integrity. Nobody can give it to you and nobody can take it away. It's 100% ours. My integrity is mine. Yet, how often do I just give it away when it's inconvenient for me? When something is going to be inconvenient, how often do I tell that white lie or that fib? Well, guess what? Is it a big deal in the short term? Does it really make a big deal as far as productivity or anything like that? You know, it may or may not. And lots of people justify those things. But where it is a big deal, is for our character, because each time I do it, it makes it easier to do that again. And instead of strengthening my integrity muscle, I'm weakening it. So when the big test comes, will I be ready? Well, if I've been telling those small lies all along, that's a good question. I don't know if we should think we're ready for the big tests if we haven't been exercising our integrity in the small ones. So integrity exercises, breaking a sweat, building your muscles. What can you do? Keep a commitment you wish you hadn't made. How many of us have made a commitment to somebody else or to something else, and later on, a week later, 2 weeks later, you're like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. I'd rather be doing this. Or something better came up, and you're like, oh, and you are tempted to back out. I've been there. I've done that. Here's another one. When your boss asks you what happened, be the first to speak up. If you're a leader out there and you've asked that question before, hey, what happened? You see all these people look at each other and nobody talks for a while, and there's that silence there, and people know what happened. But who's going to be willing to speak up and have the integrity to speak up and the courage? This is where courage steps in as part of integrity, right? And remember, you can't have integrity without courage. You can't have integrity without courage. It's an exercise in courage to exercise your integrity. Now let's talk about the fourth habit of character. Let's talk about selflessness. See, selflessness ties into courage, it ties into humility, it ties into integrity. And the interesting thing about selflessness is it precedes joy. Well, it could be the chicken or the egg scenario here. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? I don't know if joy comes first or selflessness comes first, or selflessness comes first and joy comes first. But think about a person that you know. Think about a person who's always serving somebody else. Think about a person who's always doing things for other people. How often have you seen them have a bad day? How often have you seen them unhappy? Those people who are selfless, who serve, always seem to be some of the most joyful people I know. They always seem to be living a better life. Selflessness precedes joy. And you know what? Selflessness purifies our motives as well. That's where integrity comes in. I mean, if people look at us and they're wondering, is this person being selfish or they're being selfless? They don't question our motives if they think we're selfless. If we've proven through our previous behaviors, through our habits, that we are selfless people, if we're selfless leaders, they don't question our motives anymore. When we ask them to do something, they say, okay, I think maybe David's trying to do something here that's important. I trust him. See, selflessness builds credibility and therefore builds trust. If people don't trust who we are, we got to go back and look at our character. See, it's not about learning how to build trust. It's about learning how to build our character, how to grow our character. There's a lot of books out there about building trust, and trust is an important thing. But the foundation to building trust goes back to issues like courage, humility, integrity, selflessness. Our character is what's going to make people trust us and build our credibility, because people are going to understand our motives. So, what is selflessness in 12 words or less, so a 12-year-old can understand? Putting the needs of others before my own needs, desires, and convenience. So, leaders of character, if you see that person with their hand out, they seek to serve rather than be served. You don't become a leader. They don't get that title of leader and then they expect everybody to bow down to them and serve them. I mean, that's what happens at times. But what you get there in that case, you don't get committed followers there. You just get compliant people. You get compliant employees. You don't get committed followers. What leaders of character want and what leaders of character engender and grow is our committed followers. So they do that because they're selfless. They seek to serve rather than be served. They're there for the led and they're not there for themselves. Leaders of character, they add value to others. They are constantly trying to grow the people around them. They coach. I'm sorry, but if you call yourself a leader, if I call myself a leader, and I'm not developing the people who I'm called to lead, if I'm not helping them grow to become a better version of themselves, I'm probably not leading, I'm probably managing. I'm probably looking at them just as a resource, as opposed to as a person. So I need to add value to others. And one of the ways we can add value to others, as I already spoke about, is listening to them. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Listen to them. You can add value to other people and show that they're important to you and they're important to the organization just by listening to them. And see, leaders of character show their selflessness because they don't expect anything in return. When they do something for somebody else, they don't expect anything in return. My father-in-law, God rest his soul, he's in heaven now, but he was a man who would lend money to people, and he would say to me, I'm never going to expect to have them pay me back. He never expected them to pay him back. Therefore, he wasn't disappointed ever. He was selfless like that. He just gave his money away. When people needed help, he gave it away. And even if they said they were going to pay him back, he never expected it to happen. When it did happen, it was nice, but he never had that expectation. And guess what? He wasn't disappointed very often in life either. He didn't have those expectations. So selflessness exercises. What can we do to build those muscles? Well, do something for someone else without expecting anything back. Without expecting anything in return, just do something for somebody. Serve them. But don't expect them to turn around and do the same thing for you. Don't even expect them to say thank you. Sometimes I get upset because somebody hasn't acknowledged the fact that I did something for them. Well, what's the issue there? Is it them? Well, maybe. But also the issue is my pride. They've hurt my pride by not acknowledging that I did something for them. And so it becomes my issue. The other thing is add value to everyone you meet this week. Everybody you meet this week, add value to them. Try to make them better. Try to make their day better. Be a positive influence on them. And the fifth habit we're going to talk about is duty. Now, this is a term that needs a revival. Duty, a lot of people might call that accountability. In the business section, we call it accountability. I've got the crests of the different sides of the military, the different areas of the military in the U.S. here up there, because this is a topic that in the military is prevalent. You know, people you say duty, people understand it. And see, courage and integrity and selflessness all play a role in duty. But it's a term that needs a revival because a lot of people, when they talk about duties, they think of it as a job description. Well, here's my list of duties. But it goes beyond a job description. It's just not what you do, what somebody lays out and tells you what to do. Is more than your duty is a moral obligation. It's like when you're a parent. Nobody really tells you exactly how to be a parent. There are moral obligations, though, that you know you need to do. And so your duty as a leader goes well beyond whatever somebody tells you have to do or whatever list of job responsibilities you have. So a 12-word definition of duty, so a 12-year-old can understand it, is to take action. Notice there's action involved here, based on my assigned tasks and my moral obligations. To take action based on my assigned tasks and moral obligations. And leaders of character, how they do that? They ignore their feelings. It's not about how I feel today. Well, I don't feel like doing that. It doesn't matter. When you become a leader, guess what? It's your duty to do what you're supposed to do. Whether or not you feel like it that day or not, whether or not you got in a fight with your spouse before you headed to work, whether or not you weren't caught in traffic and were an hour late getting there and now you're upset, whether or not I feel like doing my job in all parts of my job, it doesn't matter. It's my duty to do it. So leaders of character ignore their feelings. Secondly, they do what needs to be done. They don't sit there and say, leaders of character don't sit there and say, well, that's not my job, that's not my department. They don't walk by something that needs to be done and say, well, somebody else will do it. Leaders of character, no matter their title, stop and do it. They stop and take care of things that need to be done. The third thing is leaders of character, they don't make excuses. See, excuses are those things that we use to deflect blame. Reasons are the things that we use to learn from, so things don't happen again. But so often excuses just deflect blame, and when we use excuses, basically what we're saying is I have no reason to learn from this because it was out of my control. Well, leaders of character, they don't think there's anything that's out of their control. They know that excuses are going to prevent them from success in the long run. They don't make excuses because they know that everything is their responsibility because they are the leader. And the last thing is leaders of character, they don't do the minimum. They give the maximum in everything that they do. They work hard in everything and give the maximum. They don't sit there and say, well, this is good enough. It's never good enough. They're always going to give maximum effort in everything that they do because that's their duty. Now, what's that look like for, how do you exercise those things and build those muscles of duty? Well, don't make an excuse when something gets difficult. How often when something gets difficult, do we start saying, oh, well, this happened, well, this happened, well, this got in the way, well, this decision was made, well, the weather, well, the traffic, well, whatever. Don't make an excuse. See, a leader of character, they just don't make excuses. So when plan A or B fail, they go on and they try plan C, D, E, F, G, all the way to Z, because they know that it's their responsibility to find a way. They find a way, so they don't make an excuse when something gets difficult. They just find a new way of doing things. The second thing that you can do is do the part of your job you dislike and do it to the very best you can. We're not getting paid to just only do parts of our job well. It's our duty to do all parts of our job well, even the parts that we don't like that much. There's parts I don't like about my job. There's some parts I think everybody don't like about their job. But a leader of character does all parts of their job with equal effort and to the absolute best that they can. So what can you do this week to do that? And finally, the sixth habit of character that I want to talk about. The sixth habit of character is a habit I want to talk about called positivity. See, and this ties back into courage and humility, selflessness, and duty. And the Carnegie Institute analyzed the records of 10,000 people and concluded that 15% of somebody's success, they were looking at successful people, and they concluded 15% of somebody's success is due to technical training. And the other 85% is due to personality. And the primary personality trait identified by the research was attitude. What type of attitude did that person have? Now, what I like about this, it goes back to that diagram that I showed you of competence and character, right? Only 15% is technical training, but 85% goes back to the person's personality, their character, their attitude. So who's going to be successful? Is it always the person with the best training? No, we all know that. We all see very brilliant people actually do very poorly. Most of the time, it's the person with the right attitude. So positivity in 12 words or less, displaying a positive and can-do attitude in all circumstances. See, leaders of character, they don't let their circumstances choose their attitudes. They choose their attitudes themselves daily. My father used to tell me when I was a teenager, hey bud, your attitude's a choice. Make a different choice. Every day we have an opportunity to choose our attitudes. Our circumstances may not be great that day or that week or whatever, but as a leader, we've given up the right. When we've said we're a leader and when we've taken on that responsibility, we've given up the right to just choose have a negative attitude whenever we want. We have to choose our attitudes daily, and they need to be positive attitudes. People follow positivity. Leaders of character focus on the possibilities, not the problems. How many of us have sat in meetings and business meetings and somebody brings up an idea and then there's always that person in the room who says, oh, that's not going to work. And all of a sudden that new idea just dies. And it happens over and over and over again. And we wonder why that business, that team, never goes anywhere. See, as opposed to looking at the negatives, as opposed to looking at the reason why something won't work, a person of positivity, a leader of character, looks at the possibilities of the idea, not just the problems. And leaders of character, they use thankfulness to beat back entitlement. There's so many people who look at the world and they complain all the time. They complain about what the problem is with the world. And most of the time it's because they think they deserve something. They think they deserve more, right? And leaders of character exercise the habit of positivity by being thankful for what they have. And the more we're thankful for what we have, the less entitlement takes a role in our lives. So they beat back the whole entitlement mentality by being thankful for what they do have and realizing, boy, I've got it pretty good. I've got a lot of positive things going on in my life, and therefore their positivity rings through and comes out in them. So positivity exercises, breaking a sweat. How do you become more positive? Let's face it, some of us, this doesn't come naturally to us. So we're going to have to start making daily choices to be positive. So one way you can do it is leave everyone I encounter feeling better about themselves. When you walk away from everybody, do they feel better about themselves? Do they feel like something that you just added something to them? That's where that selflessness side goes into it too. You're thinking about the other person instead of yourself. Have you just made their day better? Choose a positive attitude daily, no matter your circumstances. Whatever's happened in your life, whatever is going on that day, you've got a choice. You've got a choice in your attitude, and you can choose to have a different attitude that day. We all can. It's a choice we all have the ability to make. And Just like every other choice, it helps us form a new habit. Negativity is a habit and positivity is a habit. Which one are you going to be developing today? So, in summary, I just want to point out, again, to look at these 6 habits of character and how they're all intertwined, and how courage and humility, or the absence of courage and humility, affect the other 4 that we've talked about today. Everything that we do, and every reason people follow us goes back to our character. And see, good intentions and desire to be good at something is never enough to get us to the point where we're actually good. We've got to tackle the new things. We've got to do new things. We've got to exercise these new habits. If we haven't done it before, that's okay. We can make new choices today. We'll never become good at anything. We'll never go beyond who we currently are unless we start trying new things. Because everything of value is hard before it gets easy. We've got to start practicing and do these things before we become proficient. Just like a great basketball player does not become a great free throw shooter by sitting around the locker room talking about how to shoot free throws, they actually get out there and practice that. That's what I want us here to do today. That's what I want to impress upon everybody listening today. Start practicing and doing the things you need to do in order to become the person you need to become. I'm just going to close out with this one quote by Winston Churchill. Character may be manifested in the great moments, but it's made in the small ones. Character may be manifested in the great moments, but it's made in the small ones. That's what we're talking about here today. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Anderson, for a very, very intriguing presentation. Folks, we are now open for question and answers. If you have any questions, you could either put it in the question box or you could raise your hand. There's a hand icon available on the webinar console, so if you click on it, we can give you an opportunity to speak with Mr. Dave Anderson. So let me go straight because we have a couple of hands already raised. So let me see, we have the first one from Brother Muhammad Amir Ali. Brother Muhammad, you raise your hand, but I believe, unfortunately, it's unmuted. So let me go back to another one from Mr. Paul Creasley. The question is, thank you for a very motivational presentation. What is the relationship between leaders of character and emotional intelligence?
I think emotional intelligence is a great part of being a leader of character, because one of the things about emotional intelligence it tells us is emotional intelligence, you need to be willing. And that goes back to the humility side that I've been talking about here. You need to be willing to listen to other people and need to be open to the fact that and look at the whole idea that it's not about me. And emotional intelligence has a lot to do with the fact that you focus on other people versus yourself. And I think there's a big tie-in in those humility and the selflessness portions that I spoke about, and emotional intelligence. I think emotional intelligence is a great tool that has been taught out there, but I do think that with emotional intelligence, it is a great tool. But just because we have people, we put good tools in somebody's hands, doesn't make them a carpenter. Make sure that we are focused on the overall character of an individual leader, because good tools in the wrong hands can cause manipulation and not create leaders. So, but emotional intelligence is an incredible tool, and it focuses really on the humility and the selflessness of an individual and the willingness for them to learn about themselves and how to communicate well with others.
Thank you very much. We have another from Mr. Kazi. The question is, how can one be positive if his job circumstances are not so positive?
Yeah, and that's I mean, a lot of us have circumstances like that, and we've been in circumstances in the past, and there's no doubt about it. It's not easy. These things I'm talking about are not easy, and I always refer back to my father. And if you were fortunate enough to have a father like mine, you probably refer back to yours as well. But he used to say to me, "Hey, buddy, everything's hard before it gets easy." And our circumstances. There are a lot of people who have terrible circumstances in their lives, and I look at those people and remind myself of what I do have, or how I am blessed by those things. And there's those people who have children who've died prematurely, and you have those people who have died, who are diagnosed with cancer, yet they're so positive all the time. And you look at those people and you hold them up as examples, and you realize, yeah, there's negative things here going on. How do I make the best of it? And the positivity that you show in those difficult situations has an effect on the people around you, whether or not it be at work or when you go home at night. Everybody out there knows that when you're negative at work, it does flow back to what's going on at home. And then it affects our children at home, and it affects the environment that we live in at home. And that's not a good place for children to grow up. And so if we can overcome the situations that we have and the circumstances we have, and focus and make the choice to be positive each day, it becomes easier each time. And I'm not saying it's an easy thing every time, but each time we make that choice, just like every other habit, it makes it easier to do it the same way again. And we start seeing possibilities instead of just the problems. And to the person who asked that, I really hope and I pray that your influence and your example in your work setting through the positivity is going to start having that effect on the people around you.
Thank you very much. We have another one from Brent Simcox. The question is, as a leader, do you ever feel inadequate to lead? Can you overcome this?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
As a leader, do you ever feel inadequate to lead, or can you overcome this?
Yeah, I think feeling inadequate in a leadership role, yes, I've felt that way. I think most of us, when we're first entering a leadership role, we feel inadequate. One of the most important things I think we need to do in that case is to search out a mentor. Somebody who is willing to pour into us, somebody who is willing to help us become a better leader. And don't ask the people who are currently in the same position where you are. I think it's kind of foolish to ask for advice from people who are at the same point in life where we are. It doesn't make much sense. We need to look forward, and we need to look at those people who are out there who have already been there and done that. They've already led at the level I'm leading at. They've already lived this part of their lives. And what I see from them, I admire. And then I need to go ask them, will you help me? Will you help me grow? Will you help me develop and grow into this role? I think one of the things that we tend to do too much of is we try to just put our head down and try to figure it out ourselves. When there's people who've already figured those things out, and they did it a few years ago, 10 years ago maybe. Don't get advice from people who are currently where you are on the road. Get advice from the people who've already traveled the road that you're on, and they're heading back towards you, and they can tell you what's around the next corner. The people who are walking beside you right now, they don't know what's around the next corner any more than you do. Ask the people who are coming back from around the corner and have them show you, hey, this is what you need to be aware of. This is what you need to work on to prepare yourself. So get yourself a mentor, I think, is a big thing I would say to somebody who's feeling inadequate right now in their current role as a leader. Find somebody who's been there and done that and is willing to help you grow.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Anderson, a lot of comments are also coming. People are asking from where they can purchase this book. Do we have any online link or from Amazon or?
Yes. If I just switched the slide here on the screen, my website is alslead.com. alslead.com. The book will be available here this spring. We are in the final stages of editing, and it will be available this spring. So if you go to my website, alslead.com, you can follow us there, and we will be updating on a regular basis. You can also, there's going to be a spot you can email me directly at dave@alslead.com, and I will make sure that you get our regular email updates on the book, because we will have ebooks available in the spring, as well as for direct sale from our website, and we will have an Amazon and all other venues to include Barnes & Noble and all the other venues here in the fall.
Well, thank you. Sorry, I had to bring this because we had really a number of people interested in the book, and they were asking me. So let me go to another interesting questions we have. Why do you think most of the time leaders seemingly only interested in producing their loyal followers than actually worrying about succession and producing more leaders?
Could you ask that question one more time? I missed the middle part.
This is about followers versus succession. I mean, why do you think most of the time leaders are seemingly only interested in producing followers than actually worrying about succession and producing leaders?
I think that definitely goes back. That can definitely go back to a pride issue, and where where the leader is so focused on their own success and so focused on how they look at this year, this quarter, or whatever. That and honestly, I mean, we have quarterly goals, we have yearly goals. That has to be part of what we do. Results are part of what being a leader becomes, but it is a short-sighted view of things. It is a short-sighted view. And as anybody out there listening right now, and you're wondering, am I spending the right amount of time developing my people? I just want to encourage you on this. The impact that you have on people's lives as a leader goes well beyond your quarterly results. It goes well beyond the yearly results. You want to have impact on people's lives. You want to develop them. When you're retired, when you're old and gray and you're done working, the impact that you have on people's lives are going to last a lot longer than people coming to you when you're in your 70s and 80 years old and saying, hey, remember in the spring in second quarter 2016 when we grew at 3%, at a 3% rate, that was great. Those people don't care about that. As leaders, the longest legacy we're going to have is on the people that we touch in our lives. Who are you touching? Who are you developing? And those leaders that are only focused on the short term, only focused on just getting through this quarter, just getting through this year, and not focused on developing their people, I guarantee you that team and that company is in trouble in the long run. That team and that company is in trouble in the long run because guess what? Somebody's going to leave. Somebody's going to get sick. Somebody's going to go to another company. And who's ready to pick up the ball and run with it? Who's ready to lead at that point? Well, if the leader hasn't prepared anybody for that, guess what? That whole company stalls out. That team stalls out. So as a leader, I got to think bigger. I got to think longer term and develop the people behind me so they are ready to do the job if I'm not there to do it.
Thank you very much. We have one last question from Brother Karimullah Muhammad. The question is, usually the mothers say to the child, don't share your lunchbox, otherwise you will be left hungry. Is it not stopping the development of qualities of leadership in that child?
Yes, I would agree with that. I would agree with that. We have, it's an amazing thing to watch children and to see just very early on the impact of their parents' attitudes have on how they interact with each other. And you see some kids willing to give away half their food in their lunchbox if another child doesn't have all the food. And then you have other children who will hoard it for themselves. And some of these attitudes that we have, some of these character traits, these habits that we've developed, yeah, we developed them when we were kids. But I want to go back to the whole idea, ladies and gentlemen who are listening to this right now. You can change these things about yourself, no matter how long that they've been ingrained in you, whether or not it came from the lunchbox story, or whether or not it's something that's just happened in the last year for you. You can change your habit one decision at a time. You can change your character. So maybe you've been selfish and you've been hoarding your meals all to yourself since the time you were in grade school. But guess what? The first step to changing that about yourself is to start giving something away. Start being more generous than you've ever been in your life before. And each time you do that, it makes it easier to do it again, and it reinforces a new habit. And your character begins to change. And that's what that's what my father and I, when we were talking about this book and we were writing this book, we want to encourage leaders out there. Yes, you might have been on a particular path. And some of you might be on a path that you're very happy about, and one that you would be happy to talk about. And other paths you might not be so happy about. But that doesn't matter. If you've been on a good path, guess what? If you start making poor choices, those muscles are going to get weaker. Just like if you don't exercise a strong muscle, it gets weaker. And guess what? Then you become vulnerable to injury. And if you've never exercised a muscle, guess how it's going to get stronger? By exercising it, by forming a habit. And that's what I want to encourage everybody here today. Start exercising those muscles that you haven't been exercising, those character muscles we shared. Start and continue to exercise the areas that might be strengths for you. Right? And when you do that, you become that leader of character. You become a leader of character that can change your company, that can change your family, that can change your societies. You can become that leader of character that Fred Keel talked about in his book, Return on Character, that helps provide your company with 5 times the financial returns of leaders in other companies who don't behave in the ways we've talked about today. You can do it. It's one choice at a time. That's how we form new habits.
Well, that really brings us towards the end of the webinar, so we really want to thank you, Mr. Anderson. Any concluding remarks that you would like to give before we dismiss out?
I just want to encourage everybody that being a leader is not easy. There's nothing easy about being a leader. And everybody who's in leadership right now who's listening knows that. It looks easy before you get there, doesn't it? But there's nothing easy about it. But it's one of the most rewarding jobs you could possibly have. One of the most rewarding jobs you can possibly have is being a leader. So I just want to encourage you, keep growing, keep trying to get better. How to become a leader of character, becoming a leader of character, the book that I shared with you. We're going to have a website. The website is going to be built out. There's going to be more and more resources, more and more discussions about different exercises that we can do around each of these 6 habits of character. There's going to be lots of things that come out of this book that you can continue to use with yourself, with your family, with your work teams. But in the end, it comes down to us being willing to do the hard work. We can provide you with all the information, but we have to be willing to do the work and recognize the fact that breaking a sweat, making ourselves uncomfortable is what's going to make us grow and become leaders of character. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. I really want to thank you on behalf of Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship Mile for this valuable presentation that you shared through this live webinar with our audience. So thank you very much, Mr. Anderson. And thank you all of those who participated in this webinar and for your time and for the questions that you asked, making it an interactive experience for all of us. With that note, we'd like to end this webinar. So you all